All right. I'm going to be real with you guys. This is a talk that I've been waiting to have for a really long time. You know, Micah's been in the space for a couple years. I got in last year, and I feel like our paths have almost crossed so many times. We finally got to meet a couple weeks ago in Minneapolis at Paisley Park, which was Prince's estate. And we got to tour together with Spike Lee, you know, the kind of physical legacy of Prince. To see somebody who would have stood for Web3, who supported independent creators, who supported people giving themselves second acts, you know, to do something for their whole life and then to decide, I want to do something else. Or what I've been doing prepared me for what I want to do now. You know, I kind of had this saying. My agent was telling me I need to come up with better sound bites to be quoted for, because he's like, you talk way too much. And I was like, all right, check this out. Right now, it is harder to make a living, but making a life didn't change. And when I think about somebody like Micah, I think he represents that so well. You know, Micah has a really good saying too. He always says, build worlds around dreams, not dreams around worlds. So somebody who's able to break free from the confines of what we might see right in front of us, what is easy, what is simple. For those who don't know, Micah is someone who has had a long career doing interesting things. If you look at his hat, you know, it's the LA Dodgers. He was an MLB player before he became an artist in the space. He had this turning point where it was, he was painting, you know, the whole time he was playing in the big leagues. And then he retired in 2018. And then there was this sort of moment of thinking, all right, what's next? And as somebody who loved to create and loved art, you know, he kept painting. But with that comes its own struggles. And one day, his nephew asks him, can astronauts be black? And he gets this question, right? And he gets out this 6 foot by 6 foot canvas and just starts drawing on it. You know, draws a black astronaut with this oversized astronaut helmet in charcoal, you know, experimenting in new ways, growing, you know, his artistic repertoire. And then sometime later, it becomes Aku. Aku, this world that he created around his dream and his nephew's dream. And I guess the first question I wanted to ask you is, you know, we've been in the space, and you're a leader in the space, you're a well-known artist in the space. So many people know your story. Does it feel right to be introduced that way as somebody who was an MLB player, then became an artist through that turning point? Do you like being introduced that way? Or do you prefer that it just goes to Aku and what you do?
That's a good question, man. You got any easier questions to start with? I think this is a tough one.
I was like, we got 25 minutes.
No, I think for me, I take a lot of pride in being the CEO of a media company and taking Aku from a sketch that I did as an artist to, you know, we were named by Fast Company one of the most innovative media companies of 2022. And that was my proudest accomplishment out of my entire life, out of anything, because for so long people try to put me in in a box. Oh, he's just a baseball player, so he can't paint. Oh, or now he's just a painter, he can't be a business person. Well, now I am an artist and I am a business person, so I think for me it's hard to say. I like to be called the creator of Aku, but I think that, especially in today's society, like the chief creative officer is almost like the CEO of a business, because everything we're doing right now is so creative driven.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it kind of makes me think, right? You talked about being put into a box, and when I think of being put into a box, I think about somebody who has many talents, many interests, right? Wears many hats, but then somebody else says, you have to be this. It's about condensing you. But at the same time, when we think about the NFT space, we think about a space that kind of spreads you thin and wide a little bit, right? As a way of saying, you know, you're not just an artist, you have to be a CEO, right? There seems to me like a difference between saying I can be an artist and I can be a CEO, and I can be a creative director, and I can help with the community, be a spokesperson. But then it's different to say, because you're an artist, you also have to take on these responsibilities. So how do you navigate that very small but important difference?
No, that's a great point. I think you see a lot of times, it gets in a situation where collectors, I think at some point, were buying art and like, what's the utility and what's the utility? But when I first got into NFTs, it was called crypto art in late 2019. Nobody was asking me about utility of my paintings or they were just like, this is beautiful, I want to support you. And I think as an artist, I want artists just to make art. Like, don't worry about what things that we do or that I'm doing, because it's not for everybody. And it comes with a lot of responsibility. I haven't created something in months. And that's really hard as a creative person, but like, you're busy running a business. And I think it's really important for artists, because there's a lot of money that's being made by artists. Artists are small businesses, sometimes even large businesses. And to understand how to scale out and delegate and realize you don't have to try to do everything. It's okay just to make art.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, it's a quote by Oscar Wilde. He says, when bankers get together for dinner, they talk about art. When artists get together for dinner, they talk about money. So it's this idea that bankers are starved for the kind of creativity in the world that artists put out. But at the same time, artists are starved of being able to live and pay their expenses and be able to reinvest their money back into what they do, which is something I think a lot of us miss sometimes, which is that you're kind of trying to strike this right balance in the space, right? Where the NFT space is very financialized, but at the same time, there is that sweet spot where it's artists tend to spend their money in interesting ways outside of how others spend their money, which is that a lot of it goes into making their dreams bigger, to execute on that. I kind of wanted to ask, you've been in the space a long time, 2019, right? You're somebody who's onboarded thousands of people by virtue of creating art, by virtue of talking about it, by virtue of where you come from. As the space has grown, right, we saw this kind of monumental growth in the past year, particularly last summer. I mean, what was it like seeing that wave come? And some might say is starting to go a little bit. Some think we're entering a bear market or we're in one. Some think we're entering a recession or we're in one. Seeing that wave too. Aku is a project that's been around for a long time. This wasn't something where you made a secret Twitter and a secret Discord, and then you pumped it and you said like and engage for whitelist, and then
I wish that's a lot easier.
Yeah, maybe you should have done that. But somebody who's been here and kind of been in the foxhole, watching at the macro level a lot of things change. How do you process that, and does it affect, hurt, enhance your creative vision for Aku?
I think there's a period where you see all this happening, all these new projects launching, and this goes for, I think, a lot of creators, where you why is this thing worth, we were just talking about this, why is this thing worth so much? And you can get frustrated because you realize how much energy and effort you're putting in, but some random project that just launched Twitter last week is doing better. And my argument or thesis is that we're at a point now in the NFT market where, crypto's always had this culture of memes and this culture of community. And what we're seeing right now in the market is communities, people just want to be a part of communities. And for us, and what I do in particular, we're focused on building a character and brand that can talk and communicate with 6-year-olds and 10-year-olds and not necessarily have to onboard people to NFTs, but how do you build a brand or a character or IP out so that kids can just watch your character on TV or dress up as Aku for Halloween. And I think this market right now bodes well for us to be able to build that right now and not have to focus necessarily on the market conditions and how do we, engage and try to elevate a floor price. Everybody's just kind of, recognizes that fortunately the Aku is a long-term vision that we have, and right now it's a good time. We just continue to build and get ready for the next run.
I think a lot about how in the NFT space ownership is important, because people buy into a project and they're like, all right, this is mine, this PFP is me, I am my NFT is me. I think one thing that stands out to me about Aku is, spending a lot more time with it, especially recently. I've had this weird feeling where like I've felt connected to a lot of the characters you've created without necessarily needing to own it, which is a weird feeling. And it's one that is very hard to disaggregate when you're in the space, and so many of the NFTs you pump or you like, it's the ones that you own, it's the ones that you have a sizable investment in. I think one that kind of stands out to me is the one you had for your Christie's auction. It was a one-on-one piece of a girl Aku that you had made, and there was this interesting story behind it, which is where she has the iconic helmet on, but the winner of the auction can make the decision to take the helmet off or to keep it on. And it's this weird thing where I'm like, I've looked at 15,000 of these Akus from the PFP collection, but I really want to know this piece that I don't own, that would be really hard for me to own. Like, will they take the helmet off? And I think like it's fun because it starts to build in that storytelling. Like, is it important to know what she looks like?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I've always liked to play with the technology. So like that, I did that work with async, and it's programmable artwork. So it allows the owner to control layers in the artwork. And I think that's one really cool way to utilize blockchain technology, is how you can integrate the technology into visual images. So with that, it's somebody collects this image, and it changes night and day as well. I think it's like 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. Pacific time. So every day the artwork changes. And then, like the owner can take the helmet off and reveal the first like face character in the Aku's universe and his IP we're building. And so like I look at like that as like ways that you can engage the audience in the building of IP. Because at the same time, I'm not entirely convinced that thousands of just people in a DAO can make a good story. I think that's very hard. But what I'm really fascinated with is how you can utilize different mediums to engage an audience, that allow them to feel like they're a part of the story and influence the story in certain ways. So that was a really cool piece.
It kind of brings up this kind of dilemma for me. A lot of times when I'm looking at NFTs, I ask myself, why did this project have to be an NFT? Could it have been done another way? Could you have put it in a fine art gallery, or sold it as a print, or put it on Etsy, or put it on Instagram, or sold it in some other way? And a lot of times once we start talking about interoperability, these layers from async, smart contracts, day mode, night mode, you start to think, hey, maybe that's why it has to be an NFT. But then on the other side, we're also talking about you as an artist, right? The image can exist whether or not it's an NFT. So when you look at Aku and your work, how do you approach that? Do you feel like it could have existed without being an NFT, or does it have to be an NFT?
Yeah, I think Aku is a great character. It's a character that you get lucky. When you make something like this, it's luck, because you can't force anybody to care about anything you make. But I knew it was good when my daughter, who's 2, every space helmet now is the Aku helmet. And she every day she wants to come home and watch Aku. And she's 2, and I was like, okay, this is special. But the reason why Aku had to be an NFT was because I needed to be able to prove out product market fit for this character without overcommitting too much money to this creation of IP and story, while also not having to go directly to a production studio or a publisher, because it was very important to retain ownership over the IP. It's a legacy thing. Like, how many times has a black creator owned their IP? Like, very few, right? So this was a chance to do that. And NFTs enabled me to seed the story of Aku, prove out, that there was real demand for Aku, and then go do a deal that I wanted to do on the terms that I wanted to do it on, to develop the film and to develop the TV series and product and retail and merchandise, all on the terms that allow me to retain 100% ownership of the IP. So that's why Aku had to be an NFT. And it's also important to note, like, why I have to retain ownership is because, let's think about at the end of the road and Aku becomes this film, and then IP goes to a distributor. what happens to the community? I'm in the Discord every day. I've built real personal relationships with a lot of people in the Aku community. If I don't, there's nobody better at knowing what the community needs or understanding their concerns than me. So it's very important that I retain 100% ownership over the IP. And so that's kind of why Aku had to be an NFT. Character could have lived in any other medium, but that's why it had to do it like that.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned in that answer is you talked about, when have Black creators owned, all of their IP. It reminds me too of this kind of story you're telling, right? How we started this is you talked about how your nephew asked you, can astronauts be Black? And the IP and the art and the brand being built out from there. I know you're a part of the Digital Diaspora show that's coming up that Diana Sinclair and Drifter Shoots are curating. With something like that, you see a lot of Afrofuturist themes. And just to kind of explain my sort of take on it, it's this criticism of the idea that the future of technology is this sort of tech utopia where race is not a part of it, where gender is not a part of it, where a lot of the things that we have as identities today will become erased in this faceless helmet, right? Or this like future man, future woman. And Afrofuturism's kind of been like a kind of criticism of that, as saying it sees race as a liability, but maybe both can thrive. I want to ask, as you build out this IP, how do you make that consideration of the original question, which is, can astronauts be Black? And your character, being a young Black boy, or in some cases, a young Black girl.
Yeah, for me, first of all, you definitely have to check out the Digital Diaspora.
Yeah, it looks good.
And I'm excited for that because that's actually me going back and actually doing, my own work. It's not a team of animators, so I'm super excited about that. But from an IP perspective, I think the most important thing about, you go back to the question, the original question, can astronauts be Black? My nephew's very educated. It's not like he didn't know that, it's just, you think about NASA. NASA's a government agency, so they don't market, and they don't have commercials the same way athletes have commercials, and like LeBron James being on TV. So for Aku, the main goal is to really elevate and highlight certain areas and fields that maybe don't have the same exposure as sports might have, and creating products that allow kids to connect in a way with science and tech in a ways that they maybe wouldn't have before. Because I think the future of actual work is going to be obviously digital, but think about the creative worlds that people talk about, the metaverse. There's not enough people to build the metaverse right now. You got all these people racing to build the metaverse. There's not enough people that know how to build. But you think about the younger generations that are playing in Minecraft and Roblox and coding and programming, they're coming. So what we want to do is be able to, utilize Aku as a conduit to help educate the different fields that exist and prepare people if the metaverse is actually the future.
So in some ways, it sounds like giving the next generation the right dreams, so they then keep building the world around it.
That's right.
It's interesting too, because Aku, the assets are interoperable as well.
That's right.
And for me, the way I think about it, we often think about interoperability as primarily like a tech thing, but to me, it's an art thing. Right, it's about inspiration. It's about seeing something in different forms and in different places. Yeah,
for sure. Because the one thing that I'm very conscious of is not everybody plays video games. So the metaverse is not a video game. Not everybody has time to spend in a virtual world. So that's not it. For me, the metaverse is just a wallet. And so if we're to build the Akuverse, and you want to build an extension of IP. If anybody's seen the Disney map, when Walt Disney created that map, and it showed how everything leveraged everything. Well, we have our own map internally, and it's the Akuverse, and it's how does this one single asset we make, a 3D backpack, how can we take that into this virtual environment, and then take that into a digital wearable in these virtual environments, into physical product. And we did that in Miami really well, where we had these environments we built for these animated series, those chapters that we then took into a physical 30,000 square foot space where people were immersed in these worlds. And so for me, that's how I look at the extension and expansion of IP And the real metaverse is like, now how does that wallet play across all these different ecosystems, the digital world, the physical world, and giving people an opportunity to touch and engage with Aku however they want. I think that's the future of media, and that's why, like, even like with film and TV, it's not the end all be all. Like that should be marketing for the rest of the ecosystem that you build to funnel in other IP. YouTube costs people $0, and they have hundreds of millions of eyeballs. So the distribution's everywhere.
You know, hearing like how big these ambitions are. Recently been running with a group of friends who describe themselves as Aku heads. And they've been telling me about that. They're wearing like Aku shirts every day.
It's good material.
Yeah, you know, we've been talking a ton about your work, and you know, they sat me down and I picked out my favorite trait yesterday, which is the galactic head trait.
Sick, right?
So I love it's this like astronaut helmet, but it has the galaxy around it, right? All the planets in an orbit, and it's like, it's beautiful because not only is it visually compelling, but it's the idea of like a world within this world you're building. It's like when you have that creative spark and you feel like there are fireworks in your head and the planets form and there's this big bang moment. Yep. That's why it's one of my favorites, and it goes to show some of the you know, intention and meticulousness that goes into building IP like this. But it also, you know, just to make a slight pivot, I want to ask a tough question. It was a question that I originally didn't know if I wanted to ask, but I heard you speak, consulted my Aku heads, and we decided that we're going to go for it. You know, Aku is something that has really not only taken the art world by storm, but the NFT space by storm, has shown people how to ask new questions, think about art in a different way. You know, when you had the Aku Tars release about a month ago, basically there was this, as far as I can understand it, there was a small kind of like logic error in the smart contract where you had this refund function, and it was able to be exploited in a way that locked a lot of ETH into the smart contract forever. Something like 34 million at the time. I think when I heard about that at first, I was like, whoa, right? The same way you hear about serial ruggers, crimes being committed, or like funny drama or beef, or even cool projects. You're like, wow, like this is the news of the day, of the week. But then I thought about it some more, and I was like, but you know, like, it's not just a project, there's an artist behind this, somebody with big dreams, you know, to build this out in a different way, to do something new, to inspire first thousands of true fans, and one day maybe millions of true fans. And then it got me wondering, like, with your background, like myself, I would consider myself a non-technical founder. So I've been working on some art on the side, but like last night, we were talking some ideas with my dev, and he sent me back a smart contract, and he's like, yo, what do you think of this? Pretty cool, right? And I was like, sir, like, I am way too drunk to audit a smart contract. I have no idea what anything means. But, you know, from your perspective, possibly, you know, as an artist, but then, you know, handling that brand side, you know, how did you process it? Because I know you took responsibility for it. You took responsibility for it in a way that made me gain a ton of respect for you, that made me think this project is something that I want to be a part of, which is why shortly after I did buy in after that. But I want to ask you, you know, how do you feel about it about a month later, and how does that factor into keeping the dream alive?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it hurt. I mean, it hurt because there was so much attention to detail leading up to that for months, even down to the Aku Tars, down to our brand partners. And, you know, we were all in London. I brought the technical team to London so that we could be, 6 hours ahead of United States time, East Coast time, to give us ample time to make sure everything goes well, give us more time. And a mistake still happened. It hurt me personally, not the financial side of $34 million, like, but because of the stuff I talk about, like owning IP, having leverage to do the things that we were doing, and up to that point, had executed across the board on that. Now, $34 million doesn't impact, because we were very blessed the year before to have generated over $15 million. So we were capitalized and also had venture backing as well. The $34 million, where that issue hit personally is the fact that I have to make sacrifices when it comes to production of linear content. Sacrifices that, had I had that money, I would not have had to make. And now you're talking about, something really special and rare that we could potentially do. And so that's really it. And we had to end up paying out, again, personally, $2.5 million extra. But we didn't just lose 34. I remember, Etherscan. Sending $2.5 million worth of ETH to refund people as well. But the lesson is like, man, that shit sucks for sure. But Aku's much bigger than a mistake, and he's much bigger than stopping. I wasn't going to stop after we made $34 million anyways. So we just keep going and keep building, and that's it, And like the non-technical founder, I don't want to make that excuse either. Like you scale a team out. You as the founder, as the CEO, you're responsible across the board. Like I will never ever throw that developer under the bus. I think he's an incredibly talented developer. Everybody makes mistakes. We're playing in a field that is so new that a little mistake can cost someone $34 million. That's it. He's super talented, one of the best in the business. But he made a mistake, and like I would never hold that against him, and like told him that from like right away, like sitting right next to me when it happened. Like you can't imagine how he felt. Like we'll be fine, we'll keep working, but like you have to take responsibility. So I take responsibility.
I'm like breathing a sigh of relief because I'm glad that question went well. I think you have so much poise. When I think about you and what you're doing, and all of my friends, all my Aku head friends can attest, right? You are somebody with a drive. You're somebody with poise, someone with a vision and a story, someone who has given himself a second act, which is not something we see a lot of, right? To have excelled in one field so much, but then to say, I have another calling, and to put yourself towards that. It always reminds me of like how people who are converts in some ways are always more passionate and more loyal than people who have known something their whole lives and taken it for granted, right? Moments like that, any kinds of moments we go through the space where we're tested, where we think things will be good and, things like shit happens. But how you get up from that, I think it's a place where you have a community that's watching and can see and can feel you. And I think this was one of those moments, going back to the idea of like, do you need to own something to be invested in it, to understand? This was one of those moments where I wasn't in Aku yet, right? But I saw it, and maybe surprisingly, like it made me want to be a part of it because it made me want to bet on you. It made me want to see like, how far does this rabbit hole really go? How far do his dreams really go? Because unless they go further than my eye can see, he wouldn't still be here.
No, we're here for a long time. It's funny because when we first launched Aku, February 21st, 2021, like I was still grinding. I up to that point was just trying to make it shake. We did the open edition. It sold $1.4 million. Everybody's going crazy. It's more money my whole family's ever seen combined. And right after, I called my guy that I was working on it with, and we were like, let's get back to work. And we just worked. And every day since then, we've worked every day, like every day. And I think it's because the community deserves that. Like without them, Aku's nothing. It's facts. And like, so they deserve that work ethic every day and that be able to continue to like have that vision about what it can be. And so like, that's really why it's super motivating when you have that really good people behind you.
This is my last question, then maybe we might have time for one quick Q&A question. When I think about Aku, the character you created, out of love, out of trying to answer a question, I kind of see you and Aku as partners, right? Standing like you're taller and Aku's smaller. In some ways, maybe either a younger version of you or the inner child of you or the next generation. And it makes me think, you know, Aku is someone who has this childlike wonder, these big dreams. And you, having gone through what you've been through, thinking about questions of where do we go from here? What's my legacy going to look like? If you could face, you know, your partner, Aku, and you could say anything to them, what would you say?
To really, there's no limits to anything. I really believe that, like, I personally believe I could do anything, but it's not because I think I'm talented at anything, because I'm really not. I wasn't the best baseball player, and I think anybody can be anything. You just have to really love that thing. And if you love that thing so much, then you're gonna wake up and work every day to get better and better and better. And so, like, any kid, I would encourage, or anybody, like, find the thing. And you don't know when it will happen. You could be 50 years old and find something that you can't believe you lived your whole life without, and you love it. And you'll work until the day you die to do that thing. And no money, no award, no ceremony will ever make you feel good, because you love it so much you can't stop. And so I would just tell Aku, or any kid, that, like, find that thing that you love and that you can't not do a single day, and just work as hard as you can to get better at it. Don't worry about the result, just worry about getting better. Like, that's the most important thing, is did I get better that day? Results are fleeting, you're gonna win, you're gonna lose, but just focus on how much better you can get at each day.
There you go. Yeah, I want to say I appreciate you. You know, I'm somebody who, I do get a lot of stage fright sometimes. I get really nervous about talking. When I talk with you, I just feel all the anxiety melt away.
You're great.
I feel like it's just us. You know, I learn from you. You inspire me, right? You're building a world for all of us. I think that's beautiful. So I want to say thank you. Micah Johnson, everybody.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
I don't know if we have time for maybe one question. One question. This guy's an Aku head. He's one of them.
Hi, guys. Micah, I've never asked you this, and, you know, being in the Aku community for, you know, a year and a half, however long now, it's such a unique community, and putting the buzzword aside, it really is a tight-knit group of people who are really passionate about this project and passionate of the potential for this character and the impact that it's already had and will have. Have you thought about or identified, like, some of those things, like the pillar ideals or ethics or messages that you think really bonds us all together? And thinking about those things, you know, what are kind of like the ones that come to mind initially that make it what it is for you?
It's a really good question, Max. I think for me, it's first and foremost is caring, like genuinely caring. Like, if somebody's sick, like in our community, like, we check in on them, like, and not even like, you just check in on them. It's a normal thing to do. Someone has a birthday, it's happy birthday. When someone has something, it's just caring and authenticity. Everybody's real, whether they disagree with something I do or someone disagrees with an opinion, like, we figure it out. So it's caring, it's authenticity, it's hope that like this character and this community can actually change the world. Like, you have to be really audacious to think that, like, a community of a couple thousand people, 529 in a Moon God channel, can change the world, but we do. Like, we really do. And it's every single people from all walks of life. Like, people who might have 10 followers on Twitter, but we all believe together we can change the world in the way that people view their trajectory in life. And so, like, I think it's hope, authenticity, and caring. And I think it's, like, it's the best community. Like, not even a question, because we care. Like, we, you know. Appreciate you, dog.
I think that's it, man.
Good.